Hi everyone, Julia here, recording this November 22nd, 2024. And it's been requested that I kind of just outline my path from there to here, my bio. And you can see me when I was 2.5 and see me now. All right, so I was born on August 19th, 1961 at 6:45 a.m. in Houston, Texas. I nearly died 3 times within the first few days of my life. I was an urgent birth, born in the ER of the nearest hospital, namely Doctor's Hospital on Airline Drive, of course, in Houston, Texas. Initially, I wasn't breathing, so the doctor, in desperation, decided to give me a shot of penicillin, which then caused another life-threatening reaction. Then, upon being brought home from the hospital, my older sister, who was nearly 6 years old at the time, tried to smother me with a pillow. A nurse told my mother that I was probably mentally retarded and it was probably due to the fact that she smoked while pregnant. My mother, who made it known to me and my younger sister that we were accidents, did feel guilty about what the nurse told her and tried to make it up to me with extra attention. This new situation did not sit well with my jealous older sister, who verbally abused me from as long as I can remember. As a result, I would always try to be away from my sister, going to work with my mother at the bar, sleeping on beer boxes until closing. I have two strange memories prior to starting school. In one memory, I was on a train with people from India. I was with a young nanny, and we had some funny dialogue about meditation. In the other memory, I was with an adult couple who I recall being with often. And one day we were talking about consciousness and how it's in control. And being a silly child, I said, "Consciousness, make me burp." And then I burped loudly. And we all laughed. And then we noticed a bomber plane approaching. We ducked for cover. And that was the last interaction I had with them. Perhaps these are dreams or past life memories, but for whatever reason, these memories stuck. And it wasn't unusual for me to have adult friends at that time, as my parents ran a bar/cafe and were active in several organizations. They had many friends. I spent a lot of time with adults. Some were considered aunts and uncles. Some had children, offering me other places to escape from home. Once I started school, I started staying at friends' houses as long as they would let me, often for months at a time. By age 9, I started smoking cigarettes and cannabis and started huffing chemicals and inhaling Freon. Around that time, I started staying with a family with a widowed father of 6 daughters. I stayed there off and on for weeks at a time for a few years. I migrated to other friends' houses as much as possible, avoiding going home at all costs. Even after my sister moved away when I was around 11 years old, I always stayed away from home. We were getting poorer by the day as my father was a gambler. I always felt bad. I wasn't sure why. I just didn't feel good. I was depressed but didn't understand what that was at the time. In 1973, at age 12, I started self-medicating with downers, namely Mandrex, a bootleg of a pharmaceutical painkiller called Quaaludes. Pills that made you feel confident, numb, and at ease while wrecking your motor skills, wrecking your ability to communicate, and destroying your memory. People would take a couple of Mandrex and have fatal car accidents. There were many fires started from people smoking in bed during that period too. Fortunately, Mandrex became obsolete, which opened my eyes to how everything is orchestrated by someone. It's just a simple chemical concoction yet it became impossible to access, unlike cocaine, heroin, meth, and other drugs. We also had a dry spell in Houston with respect to getting cannabis in the early 80s before everybody was growing it like they are now. It was nowhere to be found. So again, someone had or has ultimate control of which drugs get on the street. I'm sure a place like Houston, Texas is a good place to experiment on the masses. By the time I was a teenager, I'd witnessed and been exposed to a lot of abuse and violence. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. I once spent 8 days in Polk County Jail in Livingston, Texas for running away from home, and I was requiring a juvenile criminal record. In 1975, when I was 14, we moved to Humble, Texas, which at the time was a somewhat rural suburb northeast of Houston. My parents opened a new bar slash cafe there. We had to sign over our house in northeast Houston to pay for my dad's gambling debt to his Knights of Columbus gambling buddies. I was getting into a lot of trouble and dangerous predicaments in Houston, so moving to Humble possibly saved my life and kept me out of getting into more trouble. While living in Humble, I almost lost my life due to riding a challenging horse while being intoxicated on my pills. I spent 3 days in the hospital for a serious head injury. At age 15, I moved in with my first boyfriend and husband, who was 17 and had quit school and was working. He was. I stayed in school and graduated in 1979. He was depressed and suicidal. It was an abusive, tumultuous relationship. I divorced him at age 21. He later attempted suicide, ending up confined to a wheelchair to eventually overdose on pharmaceuticals. At age 22, I met my second husband. Before I moved in with him, I had two near fatal car accidents due to driving while under the influence. I went back to school and eventually became a teacher, all while still self medicating, but now on pharmaceutical muscle relaxers called somas, along with sedatives and painkillers, opiates. The drugs, the same drugs that contributed to taking my younger sister's life. Despite many detours, in 1992, I graduated from UT Austin with a geology degree and a teaching certificate, and I started teaching high school math and science as my then husband continued working on his PhD in theoretical chemical physics. Ultimately, he took a job as a software engineer in 1996 when we moved to the Dallas area. In 2000, I started teaching math at a community college where I and my husband met his new wife. In March of 2001, my husband and I visited Amsterdam. We were sitting at a bar in the red light district, and we noticed a woman almost faint, and immediately afterwards, I started feeling extremely nauseous and out of sorts. I stepped outside to sit on the stairs, thinking I was going to vomit, but I had a slight seizure instead, losing consciousness. I had no clue what was wrong until years later when I realized that an entity had attached to me. I was in really bad shape at the time, typically taking as many as 20 to 30 pills a day, and I was extremely depressed. I was at a very non-optimal frequency. My marriage was rocky for many reasons, but my husband and I had a heart-to-heart talk after this trip, and he promised he would stay with me no matter what. His promise was not enough to pull me out of my depression and motivate me to stop self-medicating. Of course, my drug use was a huge component contributing to the disharmony in my marriage. In May of 2002, my second husband divorced me to marry my former student, whom he had been having an affair with since at least September 2001. I always predicted that he would leave me for a younger woman during his midlife crisis, and I manifested exactly that. I was now 40 years old and all alone. I was devastated, amping up the self-medicating as I spent the next several years searching for Mr. Right. From summer 2002 through winter 2005, I partied like a rock star living in Austin, Texas. I knew the only way to stop all this extreme self-medicating and the guise of partying was to move. So I moved to Prague as my parents were Czech immigrants. Upon moving to Prague, getting off the meds, and getting a new boyfriend, my frequency improved. I had another seizure episode as the attached entities exited my being. I only sorted out what happened in retrospect. I only used doctors for getting recreational drugs, so I never went to the doctor concerning these episodes. I've never trusted allopathic medicine. I stayed in Prague until April of 2009 when I lost my job as a conference producer for the pharmaceutical industry due to the economic downturn, before returning to Austin, where I fell back into my old habits, which I was already falling back into as I was leaving Prague. I had another seizure episode as I attended my last conference in Amsterdam. Just like the first time this happened, I was far from resonating at optimal frequency. Later, I deduced another entity or entities had attached to me. In retrospect, I can observe how by the entities were attached, I was very well received by the partying crowd and fell into a plethora of opportunities for all kinds of debauchery. It's as if the entities attached to me sought out those entities attached to others, and they knew where to get all the party favors. In 2013, I began to pull out of the party scene and started my journey of introspection. I cut way down on the recreational meds and alcohol. I quit eating meat, and I adopted my dog, Biggie. I attended an ayahuasca ceremony and had a Kundalini awakening the following week. With this frequency change, I had another seizure episode and later deduced that it was the entity or entities leaving again. I began embarking on emotional healing work, exploring many modalities. In 2014, my nephew Kenneth became disabled, partially paralyzed, and having difficulty with speech, reading, and writing after having an ischemic stroke, which was the result of a violent crime and medical mistakes. He came to live with me in 2016 and will likely live with me until I depart this realm. Around the same time, I decided to quit being part of the system, and I quit my job in education. When I first started teaching, I was pro academia, but I now advise to find your passion and find a way to pay your way with your passion and live simply. In this age of technology, we all have a worldwide customer base, something for everyone and plenty to go around. As I started coming out of my latest chemical fog, I developed a strong desire to help others. I helped a couple of people with healing herbal oils and decided that I wanted to help people heal. Eventually, I started focusing on energetic healing. In 2017, I became a Biofield Tuning practitioner and a Reiki master. In 2018, at the invitation of a high school friend, Kenneth Biggie and I moved to Spain. In 2021, we migrated over to Portugal after practically becoming homeless in Spain. Kenneth stayed in a friend's RV, and I lived in my tent nearby. It was summer and rent skyrocketed in that tourist location, and we were on a very tight budget at the time. I was perfectly content living in my tent. It was very liberating. Upon moving to Portugal, we lived at a new friend's house, paying what we could, and now we rent a quaint house in a friendly village here in Portugal. This year, I became a Mace Energy Method practitioner, and I've developed a process where I combine Mace Energy Method and Biofield Tuning. Mace Energy Method was the icing on the cake of energetic emotional healing modality. I'm thrilled to be a part of helping get Mace Energy Method out to the collective. Throughout my life, I always innately knew that I created my reality, and I've seen my hopes and my worries manifest. I'm extremely happy, and I'm surprised to be alive. It's been quite an adventure, and it's getting better all the time. We are all divine spiritual beings, and we have the potential to live our best life, happy, enthusiastic, and balanced. I hope to help as many people as possible get to that place. We are all here for a reason. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Remember to stay focused on what you want, help others if you can, and have some fun. Ciao, ciao.